So this is a review of how to graph using our TI graphing calculator. And so once you have it on the home screen, once you turn it on, this is our home screen. If you want to graph anything, we're going to go to y equals on the upper left-hand corner, first row. So click on y equals, and if there are anything in y equals, you're going to clear everything out. Those are all your functions. And you want to make sure that none of your plot is highlighted. So if any of these is dark highlighted, you want to go up, press enter to unselect it. So now right now one of my plots is highlighted. We're going to click enter again to unselect it. So just make sure that none of the plots are highlighted and there are no other functions in here. So we're going to type in our function that we want to graph from our notes. 8x, x is right next to alpha. Squared is a shortcut for the square button on the first column next to the comma, plus 16x plus 3. And if you have trouble getting out of the exponent, you just have to hit the right arrow to get out. So 8x squared plus 16x plus 3. And so y equals is where you're going to have the equation. And remember when we graph functions, we said there are 3 representations: the equation, the graph, and a table of values that shows you all the points on a graph. So if we want to see the graph, on the top row all the way to the right is the graph button. We're going to go ahead and press graph, and our graph shows up. So usually when we graph, our default graph window is set to standard. So x goes from -10 all the way up to 10, and y also goes from -10 all the way up to 10. So usually we can see our graph in here, but we can also change our graph if necessary to fit, we can change the window to fit our graph. So if your calculator window is not set to the current standard window, it's very easy to go do that. If you click on zoom in the top middle and arrow down or select option 6, that will bring you to zoom standard, which brings you back to the standard window screen of -10 to 10 and -10 to 10 on the x and y. So let's say that if this vertex goes further down past -10 on the y, we can change the window of our graph if we want to fit that in. And we can change that manually. Again, top row, right next to y equals is the window button. So if we click on window, we can see that our current window is set x min as -10 and x max as +10, y min as -10 and y max as +10. And then the x scale and y scale is set to 1, meaning that every tick mark is 1 unit. So if I want to see further down on my graph, let's say I want my y-axis to go down to -20, I can change it to -20. And then if I hit graph again, notice that my y-axis reaches further down. Right, so in this case, zoom standard is fine. I can see all of the different critical points on my graph using the standard window screen. And so let's go ahead and find all those critical points. We're going to start with the y-intercept. Anytime you want your calculator to calculate anything on a graph, we're going to press second, and then calc. This is where the trace button is. Calc is right above it, but you have to press second in order to reach that menu. So second calc, and this is your calculation menu. Your calculator can calculate any y values for you. Once you type in an x value, it can calculate all zeros or x-intercepts, max and mins, and any intersections. So to find a y-intercept, we're going to press second calc, and we're going to select option 1, which is value. Press enter, and you can type in any x value and it will give you the corresponding y value. Now we know that the y-intercept has an x coordinate of 0, so I want to type in 0 for x, press enter, and it tells you that when x is 0, y is at 3. So 0, 3 is my y-intercept. Okay, and then let's now find the vertex. So we're going to go back to our calculation menu, second calc, back to the calculate menu. And our vertex, depending on whether my parabola opens up or down, is a maximum or your minimum. and you have to tell your calculator which one it is. So in our case, because our parabola opens up, this is going to be a minimum. So we're going to select option 3, min. Press enter. And once we've selected minimum, on the bottom left-hand corner, your calculator is asking you for a left bound. So we're going to move, a cursor appears. So we're going to use the left arrow to move my cursor to the left of my vertex, slightly to the left, past it, and press enter to set the left bound. And now my calculator is asking me for a right bound, so we're going to move the right arrow to move the cursor to the right of the vertex and press enter to set the right bound. Okay, once you set the right bound, your calculator is going to ask, do you want me to guess? So essentially what you're doing is you're narrowing down the spaces for your calculator, and you're saying, can you find me the minimum value of my graph between these two intervals? And depending on the model of your calculator, these dotted lines may or may not show up. That's okay. So we're going to press enter for the guess. And my calculator guesses that the minimum, or my vertex in this case, is at -1, -5. All right, so we have to hit second calc. Don't just press trace, because if you press trace on graph, you can trace anywhere, right? But you're estimating this. You're guessing where the vertex is. We want our calculator to calculate for us instead of using the trace button. So always use second calc. All right, so value gives us any y value once we type in an x value, and that's how we find a y-intercept. Type in 0 for x and find the y. Max and min helps us find the vertex depending on whether it's a maximum or a minimum. And then if we want to find the x-intercepts, we're going to select option 2, which are the zeros. So arrow down, we'll select 2. Zeros are the same as x-intercepts. And because there are 2 x-intercepts, you have to find them one at a time. So let's start by finding the x-intercept on the left. Okay, again, finding x-intercepts and finding vertex is just about the same. Once we select 0, calculator is asking me for a left bound. So I want to use my left arrow to move the cursor past the x-intercept to the left. Press enter, and then use the right arrow to move the cursor past the x-intercept to the right. And you don't want to go too far close to the vertex, because then your calculator will get confused as to which point you're looking for. So just a little bit past the x-intercept that you want to the right. Here or here is both fine. Press enter to select the right bound. And again, you're narrowing down your space. You're telling your calculator, my x-intercept has to be between these two boundaries. Can you find it for me? Press enter for the guess. And there it is. It guesses that the x-intercept, one of them is at -1.79, if we round to the nearest hundred, comma 0. And to find this other one, we do the same thing. Second calc, to go back to the calculate menu, option 2, 0. And now because I'm looking for this x-intercept, my left bound is going to be a little bit past this x-intercept to the left, so somewhere over here. So I gotta move my cursor. Your cursor always appears where you left it the last time. So a little to the left past the x-intercept that I'm looking for. Press enter. And then right bound, we're going to move the cursor to the right past the x-intercept. And then press enter for guess. And so here's the other x-intercept, -0.21, comma 0. Right? So we can find all our critical points. After we graph, we go to second calc, and y value for the y-intercept, type in 0. X-intercept is option 2, 0, left bound, right bound, guess, one at a time. And then vertex is maximum or minimum, again, left bound, right bound, and guess. So we can identify all of these points when they are not so nice to calculate using our graphing calculator. And so y equals gives us our equation. Graph gives us our graph. If you want a few more points besides the critical points on your graph, we can also look at the table of values, which is where the same, exactly where the graph button is, except right above it says table. And in order to get there, you have to press second. So second table brings us to a table of values for our function, for our graph. So when x is -6, I know y is 195. When x is -5, y is at 125. And when x is -4, -3, -2, -1. And you can see that when x is 0, y is 3. And you can identify this as the y-intercept. So you can actually scroll up or down to get more points if you want. So table gives us a table of all values. Okay, and if your table doesn't go up by ones, you can change the table setting. So in the first row, window changes the setting of the graph, the x and y axis, and right above it is table setting. That allows you to change your table setting. So second table setting. And so right now, my table setup is my table starts at -5. You can change that if you want, wherever you want it to start. And then this little change in table equals 1. So this means that my table is going to go up by 1. So -5 is going to be the start, -4, -3, -2, -1, etc. So if you want to change it to, let's say, if I change it to 0.5 instead of 1, then it's going to go up by 0.5. So it's going to go -5, -4.5, -4, -3.5, etc. So that's entirely up to you how to change your table. All right. And so with all of these points that my calculator will calculate for me, I can make my graph.